Right, Angular routing. So we already saw some implementation of routing when we looked at React, right? And the concept was that that we were replacing the default, the native implementation of navigation, right? Typically in navigation, the way you implement it is that you have links that reference elements or content or HTML pages, right? And when you click on the hyperlink, the entire content is replaced with whatever file you are navigating to, right? That's the old school of implementing navigation, right? So we did away with that in when we looked at single page applications. Single page applications, it's not at all that way, right? We load the main page, the index page, only once, and then we strategically load different components at different times and replace the content inside of divs, right? And we do that programmatically, right? And we have an infrastructure that allows us to do that, right? Typically, we do that by hijacking the hashtag mechanism that allows us to, identify the fact that there's a navigation, the URL changed, but we don't really want to unload the document. We just want to be notified that the URL changed, and we just want to go and fetch new content, right? And in React, we did that with the router, right? We did routers, and then we said, okay, these are all the links, and whenever you navigate to this particular link, I want to load these components. Yes? And that mechanism behind the scenes, basically what it did is that it generated an AJAX call to go fetch those components, load them, and then replace the content whenever you wanted to navigate them. So so Angular will be somewhat similar to that, right? Right. We're going to follow the same idea, right? There will be one single index page that's going to load just once, right? And we need to have a mechanism to map, whatever URLs you have to what component you want to display. Okay. So there'll be, the syntax will be different, but it's the same idea. We need to map URLs to what components we want to render. Yes? Okay. The only added thing perhaps that we're going to be seeing here is that that we can choose. Well, you could do this in React as well, where you can nest components inside of components, and where is it that you want to render those dynamic elements that are being loaded. So the syntax is slightly different, but the concept is the same, right? These are both single page application frameworks, right? And they follow the similar ideas. So let's take a look at routing. All right, so we're just implementing a new hello world routing, and we're going to serve it up, and we have a hello routing, so that's nothing new. So let's say here implement a couple of components. We'll implement several components. One, a login page, a profile page, and a register, so that we can just give you an idea of navigating between these three. Okay, we'll navigate between one of them whenever we click, and sometimes the navigation is passive, right? If I click on this URL, then I just want to load that component. Right? But sometimes it's not passive. Sometimes you want it to be active, meaning when you click on something, you don't necessarily want to navigate right away. I want to be just notified that you want to go there, right? But I don't want to navigate until I have a chance to look at this, right? And if it's okay, then I'll navigate programmatically, right? So we want to be able to manage both. For instance, if you click on from login, I want to navigate to the register page whenever I want, and back to the login page, from login to register, from register to login, and there's no logic needed there. But if I log in or I register before navigating to the profile, I want to verify that this user doesn't already exist, that the username and password match. Right, I want to do some validation before I decide to actually navigate to the profile page. Yes. So let's take a look at this. So we're going to implement three components. So the login component, then the register component, and then the profile component. Those three components, right? and they're going to be trivial. So there's nothing complex about them. So each one is going to have maybe login, register, and profile. They're trivial. There's nothing too much to it. So we need to have a place to configure the fact that, you know, if we see a particular URL, right, this is the component that should render. If you see this URL, this is the component that should render, right? And also we need to be able to configure whether we want to go directly, or do you want to be notified first, right? Do you want to look at this before you navigate, right? So to do that, we're going to have a centralized file where we're going to be doing this. You don't have to, but it's a good practice, right? To have a single place of maintenance, right, where you have all the declarations of you know, if you're here and you click on this, this is where you're going to navigate. Kind of like a state machine, right? One single place where you have everything configured, right? That says where you are. If this happens, this is what I want to. This is the way I want to react. Right? So, you know, all the nodes, all the edges, right, and all the events that go between the edges, between the vertices. Yes, like a state machine. So we're going to do this in a file called app.routing.ts, and we're gonna load a couple of two from the router package. We're going to load the routes and the router module. Okay, we're going to load those two. And also in here, we're going to load all the components that we want to navigate to. Let's start with login, just login for now. So in here, in an array, we're going to declare all the vertices and all the edges in our state machine. We're going to say that these are all the routes. If the path in the URL has login, then the component that I want to navigate to is the login component. Okay, and so in here in this array, I would list all my vertices and all my paths, right, listed here. And then at the end, I just load all the app routes, right, and then I export it. Right? Once it's exported, we need to load it in our module, in our app.modules. We load it and we import the routing. Right, that's the app.routing file we just created. Right, and we're going to import it in there. That's it. That's all we need to do. Now it's configured for navigation. It's configured for navigation. We now have to decide where is it that we're rendering these things. We know that if these paths, we see these paths, I know what component I want to load, but I haven't set it where to run it, where to render it. Okay, where to actually render it. So that's separate. To do that, we have two things. One is a hyperlink that actually renders the URL, right? And that hyperlink has a special attribute which is called router link, right? That's an Angular specific attribute, right? Which is aware of our routing declarations, right? All those declarations that we loaded earlier, it says those map to these. Right? So that /login maps to the login we declared as a path. Right? So this says, oh, I know so behind this, there's some code behind this, right? That's going to listen for that routing to be login, and now so that covers the path part, right? Listening to the path. Okay. The other part is, where do you want to render this, right? So typically you just want to render a component where, you know, one at a time, right? You would say, all right, so you want to display either login or the register or the profile, yes? And they're rendered wherever you have a router outlet, right? Whatever component is loaded, right, is going to be injected. The content is going to be injected into the router outlet. Right? For instance, if we load the hello routing and we have the hyperlink there, right, the login, notice that it doesn't display anything. It's just a hyperlink. Yes, but you can't see the URL. You can't see the URL. That URL does not have login, the first one. But when you click on login, the URL changes to /login. Okay, /login. And when it changes to /login, notice the login content down below. Right? It loaded the component and it injected it right under the hyperlink because that's where I told it to render. That's where I told it to render. Now this router outlet can be used in many places, right? So it could be that one component contains another component, right? That contains another component, which contains another component. Each one of them, right, could have router outlets, right? So that as you load one, you can have the other one load something that is nested, and then nested, and then nested, and then nested. So each one could have its own, set of router outlets that loads something that is nested within a parent component. Here, the parent component, is the app component. It's the parent component. But login could contain some other component underneath with its own router outlets, with its own links. Make sense? Right? Also, router outlets can be named. Right? You can give it names. Right? And then you could say, hey, render this component in that outlet. Not that one. It's this one. Right? You can name them and say which one do you want to which one you want to declare it. And also the path that we saw earlier, we'll see a little later. Those paths, those objects where it has path component, path component, path component, those also can be nested, where you can have a parent-child relationship of components and paths. Right? The paths can build on each other, especially if you have like navigating into an application that's very deep, where you can go from parent to child to child to child to child, right? And you can nest them, right? So for instance, going from from the list of courses down to the modules, down to the lessons, down to the topics, and then down to the widgets, right? Where each one depends on their parents. Right? So that would be a perfect example of being able to navigate from parent to child. So here's just an example of going a little further. We have a register component and profile component loaded in there, and we're just mapping them to some paths here, register and profile, and so that we can now perhaps navigate to each one of those. And now here we are adding just a couple more links. Right. First we only had login. Right. Now we're adding the next two, register and profile. But we still have the router down below. So notice the new hyperlinks now, register and profile. We click on login, we see login. If we click on register, we see register. We click on profile, we see profile. Pretty easy, right? Okay, so let's it takes us a little further, and let's add forms, right?